Chapter 6, Right and Wrong. Here's a quote. The only way you know that a line is crooked is because you have a concept of what straight is. That's from C.S. Lewis out of Mere Christianity. By the way, if you haven't read Mere Christianity, please put that on your to-be-read list after this one. A filibuster is a political procedure where one or more members of Congress debate over a proposed piece of legislation to delay or entirely prevent a decision being made on the proposal. Explained another way, a filibuster is what happens every night at my house when it's bedtime for the kids. One night recently, part of my daughter's strategy was to tell me about what she had learned in school that day. Sure, she'd been home for about 6 hours and waited until it was bedtime to share this vital information, but it ended up being a fascinating conversation. She proudly explained, "Daddy, if I say purple is the best color, that's called my opinion, because my friends could say that blue is the best color. But if I say 2 plus 2 equals 4, that's a fact, because it's true for everybody." Even in first grade, we recognize that opinions come from people. An opinion can only exist if a person thinks it. However, some universal truths do not come from people. These universal truths are valid and binding for everyone, whether or not the individual agrees with them. They would be true even if there was no one on the planet. Whether or not an individual or group accepts it, 2 plus 2 equals 4 for everyone at all times. Even if the planet were uninhabited, would 2 apple trees plus 2 pear trees still not equal 4 trees? That's why we say that math is discovered, not invented. The laws of mathematics aren't created by people. They are real and exist on their own. Conversely, would "I think purple is the best color" still be true if no one is on the planet? Of course not. That requires you, a person, to be there to think it. So to summarize, an opinion. I think purple is the best color. That's true for me only. It's not binding for anyone else. It requires a person to think it to exist, and it is created by humans. In contrast, we have universal truth. Example, 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's true for everyone, even if an individual doesn't accept it. It would still be true if no one were on the planet, and it is discovered by humans. Now, consider these statements. 1. Torturing babies for fun is morally wrong. 2. Molesting children is morally wrong. 3. Racial discrimination is morally wrong. 4. Terrorism is morally wrong. Are these "I think purple is the best color" opinion statements, or are these 2 plus 2 equals 4 universal truths? Let's test them. First, are they true for everyone, whether or not an individual accepts them? Absolutely. Think about a psychopath who actually does think torturing babies, molesting children, discriminating based on race, or committing terrorism is fun. Maybe their upbringing or culture gave them the idea that these things were okay. Perhaps even their government promoted these things. Think Nazi Germany. Do we give them a pass because their personal opinion is that it's acceptable? Or are there universal moral truths that say these things are wrong, whether or not an individual accepts it? Secondly, would the statement still be true even if no one were on the planet? They certainly would, because they are universal truths. Therefore, just as math is real and exists on its own, universal moral truths are also real and exist on their own. Just as mathematics laws are discovered, not invented by people, moral laws are not invented by people either. Takeaway number 1 in this section is that moral laws are like the laws of mathematics. People do not invent them, yet they apply to everyone. They would be true even if there was no one on the planet. Consider what this means. Moral laws essentially describe a code of conduct for people, what is right and what is wrong. This analysis tells us that we have a code of conduct that is not invented by people, but is valid and binding for all people. This moral code of conduct requires a moral code giver. We must decide which worldview makes more sense of this reality. On one side of the chart is God. God is the moral code giver. On the other side of the chart is no God. What is right and wrong is just a matter of personal opinion. While this concept may sound new to you, it's not. You inherently know that God's moral code of conduct exists and applies to everyone. In fact, you use this code of conduct anytime you disagree with someone else on a moral value. God's moral code of conduct serves as an unchanging standard that all actions can be measured against. Think of it like this. If your watch says it's 1:30 p.m. and my watch says it's 1:35 p.m., whose watch is correct? They both could be wrong, but we know both cannot be right at the same time. Your opinion is that your watch is accurate. My opinion is that my watch is accurate. So how do we settle this? We need to refer to a standard that transcends both watches. In other words, a standard outside of both watches. So we would compare our watches with the UTC, which is Coordinated Universal Time. This is the official basis for civil time today. If we left it up just to our individual watches, it would ultimately come down to your opinion against mine. We know that both watches can't be right at the same time, but what makes your opinion any more valid than my opinion of the time? The way to solve this is that we need a universal standard outside of the individual watches to compare it to. We check the external standard, and whoever's time is synced up with that standard is correct. Now, instead of the time, let's insert a moral issue. Person A believes that abortion is acceptable, while person B believes that abortion is murder. Both cannot be right simultaneously, and neither of us believes it's just a matter of your opinion against mine. If it were, what would make one opinion any more valid than anyone else's? No, the way to solve this is to refer to a universal standard outside of humanity. Whether or not we even realize it, we both inherently seek to measure our actions against God's universal standard that applies to everyone. Takeaway number 2 is that anytime you disagree with someone else's moral values, you're acknowledging that there is an unchanging standard outside of humanity that applies to everyone. So let's review our chart. God. God is the moral code giver. No God. What is right and wrong is just a matter of personal opinion. God. God's moral code of conduct is the unchanging standard that all actions can be measured against. No God. You've never disagreed with anyone else's moral position on anything because it's just their personal opinion. One way that people who don't believe in God try to explain God's moral code of conduct is to say that what is right and wrong is actually determined by what society deems acceptable. It sounds reasonable, but it begs all sorts of questions like, which society? What if society has it wrong? What if the members of a society have radically different viewpoints on whether something is right or wrong? Leon Trotsky was a Russian revolutionary and a leader of the Bolshevik Party. He helped incite Russia's 1917 revolution with Vladimir Lenin and subsequently led the Soviet Union's Red Army. After Lenin died in 1924, Trotsky engaged in a power struggle against Joseph Stalin and lost. He was pushed out of his roles and was ultimately expelled from the country in 1929. He lived the rest of his life in exile in various locations, including Turkey, France, Norway, and Mexico. While in exile, Trotsky continued to write and criticize Stalin. In August 20th, 1940, Trotsky was attacked in his Mexico City home by Ramon Mercader, an undercover agent for the Soviet Union secret police. Mercader got alone with Trotsky in his study and struck him from behind in the head with an ice axe, puncturing his skull. Mercader testified at his trial. I laid my raincoat on the table in such a way as to be able to remove the ice axe, which was in the pocket. I decided to not miss the wonderful opportunity that had presented itself. The moment Trotsky began reading the article, he gave me my chance. I took out the ice axe from the raincoat, gripped it in my hand, and with my eyes closed, dealt him a terrible blow to the head. Trotsky died the next day. The ramifications of Trotsky's assassination are fascinating. The murder was committed in Mexico. Therefore, Mercador was turned over to Mexican authorities and ultimately convicted of murder. He was sentenced and served 20 years in prison. He was released in 1960 and moved back to the Soviet Union in 1961. Upon his return, the head of the KGB presented Mercador with the country's highest civilian award, the Order of Lenin. This award was given for outstanding service to the state. So, which is it? In Mexico, the assassination was considered morally wrong and caused Mercador to become a convicted cold-blooded killer, while in Russia, that same act was considered morally right and earned him the title Hero of the Soviet Union. Was the assassination moral or immoral? Takeaway number 3 is morality requires a standard outside of human opinion. That measuring stick is called God. Society is not outside of human opinion. If good and evil are just man-made, then there is nothing truly good or truly evil. It's just a matter of opinion. Your opinion may be that smashing an old man in the head with an ice axe for political gain is wrong, but Joseph Stalin's opinion was that it was wonderful. Mexican society may say it's wrong, but Soviet society applauded it. Inherently, we know there is a universal moral code that applies to all people beyond you say tomato, I say tomato. If there is no God, then it's just your opinion against 7 billion other human opinions. And if it's just opinion, then you have no right to say your moral ideas are superior to anyone else's. Some people think that tragedies like the Holocaust, 9/11, and Sandy Hook were justified, understandable, or even heroic. If even one of these things is objectively wrong, God exists. If anything is objectively wrong, God exists.